we have not recorded the start. So hello again. We're starting the recording now for people who are joining this some other time. It'll be online afterwards. So yes, so let's start with the subject. We have an hour, so I'll finish at whatever time that is for you in 55 minutes from now. And so I'll try to be punctual. But I have also reserved a few minutes for us to have a little discussion and questions and answers. So let's do that. But we can also do that as we go along. So here's the subject. As I said, I'm part of CIETAR Brazil, and we were invited to participate in the webinar CIETAR Europe series. So we arranged that about half a year ago, and I'm glad you could make it. So when we thought about the subject, or when I thought about the subject, you know, the World Cup came up, and so since then I've been, you know, it was an interesting experience, of course, not only sports-wise, but anthropologically speaking also. So that was, of course, a big event here for us and for Brazilians, and for the whole world, I suppose. In some parts more, in some parts less. You know, if you're from Florida, you're maybe not such a soccer fan, but you know how that is in the rest of the world. And but still, you know, the Americans also participated, and it seems it's growing. So the thought was to talk about the intercultural perspective. So I've gathered a few thoughts, and I threw some away and put some in. So it's, you know, don't take me too literally. This is not a scientific presentation, neither a doctorate thesis, but maybe some thoughts and maybe some interesting things that we can share here. I've had help with my colleague is also online, Giovanni. Thank you, Giovanni. He helped me quite a lot. So we've been discussing the subject for a couple of months, and it's interesting. I think it can develop into something more, which is great. So again, I forgot one thing about the logistics. You have handouts also online. So you can, there's two, I've added these slides that we're using now, so you know, no need to take photographs or whatever, or to write everything down. So you can download them during the presentation or afterwards. It'll be available a couple of minutes, of course, after we finish. There's these slides, and there's a second file which is working with the Brazilians, which are some thoughts I have gathered and which I use sometimes. So feel free to download them now or later. Probably better later. And so let me just present myself a little bit more. So you've seen my name and maybe read a little bit about my bio. I've been in Brazil for 17 years now. So I arrived in '98, and I started working at Robert Bosch on the local contract. I actually came here and looked for a job and stayed. So I worked about 10 years at Robert Bosch automotive parts, you know, and then I started in 2007. I thought, no, this, you know, let me start something new. I actually didn't work much in HR. I was always on the commercial side and with projects. But then I started working basically with expats and trainings, and since then I've been working, doing that also. You know, migrated to leadership trainings, and I got a coaching education here in Sao Paulo. So I've been putting all that together, and it's great fun. And you know, I'm also, of course, I don't know, married to a Brazilian. So we also, you have this thing in family, as probably all of you, my colleagues here who are joining us from other CIETARs. Okay, so my company is called Flexpert Training. And I work on these different initiatives, as I said. I'm part of CIETAR Brazil. I was treasurer from the very beginning and always, you know, founding member. 2 weeks ago we had elections, and I went on to first secretary. So we've been establishing it for 4 or 5 years in Brazil, so it's quite young. But we are satisfied with the evolution. We've had some great speakers for our last conferences. And we have a new conference coming up in 23rd to 24th of October. So if you happen to be in the region, or if you can make it, we'd be glad to help you also to stay here and make your stay a little more pleasant, and who knows, a little cheaper. So, you know, that's the propaganda, of course, I have to make for Cietar, right? And I would like to ask you, so maybe that's the first poll I would like to ask you. How many of you are Cietar members? So you should be seeing the question now. Okay, I'm seeing you answering. Okay, thank you. So I'm having here 80% saying they are Cietar members and 20% saying they are not. So Cietar, for those who are not familiar, is an organization, an association for intercultural research and training and idea sharing all over the world, and we have different chapters in different countries. So thank you. That's good to know. So you know what. So that's the right public from, of course, Cietar Europe. I think I forgot to mention Maura and Barbara, who are from Cietar Europe and invited us to do this. I think also Ricardo was part of launching this. So thank you for having me. Okay, again. All right. So what am I going to talk about? We are going to talk about football, and I've mentioned some thoughts about intercultural dimensions in Brazil. So that's what I'm going to cross here, some numbers on that, and I'm going to get to the conclusion that there are some issues regarding hierarchy, individualism, and emotions when you play soccer. As I said, I want to be very careful. Don't take me too literally. And if I tend to, the how do you say the disclaimer we always use in the beginning of our trainings. It's all relative, and of course, there's no good or bad. Okay, and I also have a very small sample, so we'll look at that in just a minute. Okay, so of course soccer is a big thing in Europe. I think you are seeing here the picture. We took this in Rio during the Confederation Cup, so in 2013, so that's a year earlier. And if you've been to Copacabana or if you've seen, I mean, that's what's one of the stereotypes, and the boys playing soccer on the beach. So that's of course has to do with Brazil all of the time. Okay, so I'm going to share here or ask you a question. Let me just pick that up. When you think about the World Cup in Brazil, I'm going to put this in the chat box. What comes up for you as thoughts? What was it that struck you most at this World Cup? That's the question I'm asking you there. So maybe if you could answer and put your answer in the chat box. I'll give you a minute for that. Okay, I'm reading here some things about favelas, yes, about poverty, about teamwork from Germany, pre-event reporting and during event reporting, positive, negative. Okay, that's an interesting point. Never knew so much about those problems, emotions, corruptions. Okay, Brazil lost. Emotions. Yeah, okay. how the country came together. So even it seems, thank you for sharing. It even seems that you have some of you must have been here, okay, in the country at the time. So you see, I've just turned off my webcam. I'll put it on later on. Let me get back to the screen. So that's really, you know, what a lot of things that we will also be talking about, poverty, communication, inequality. I'm going to move on here and just show you a few words on you know, everybody knows that soccer is important in Brazil. We have those words that were actually translated from English straight into Portuguese. So you have them here, the pronunciation. Okay, sorry, I have to put the, yeah, there you go. So you're seeing two words there, futebol, which is a little differently written than in English, of course. Chutar, to shoot. So we have some words there that were brought here, in which we use very much in English. So it's even in the daily language, you see that it's very, very present, the soccer subject. And then we also, if I go on a little bit, we have these sayings, you know, these kind of proverbs. We say, for example, show de bola, when something is cool or when something was great. We say, you know, that was a ball show. You know, probably in English there must be some similar translations to at least some of these. Sorry if I can't always remember them. The other thing, for example, is if somebody is motivated and, for example, works for the company and does this, you know, with all his blood, we say he's wearing the shirt, vestir a camisa. So it's something like to be committed with the company or with the organization. Okay, that's also very. So these are, let's say, sports expressions which we use in everyday life. Pisar na bola. So if you step on the ball and probably fall, that's because you've made a mistake or you weren't careful. So that's something also. So if I offend somebody, for example, I stepped on the ball with you and I fell and I made a mistake, you know, and I didn't do well. So that's pisar na bola. Chutar em goal e acertar. So this is kind of like, you know, you try to shoot on the goal and try to make the goal. So this is kind of the tentative on trying to be successful, to take a shot and score. I'm translating this here. And then the last one, which I remembered here, which is also interesting. At this height of the championship, we say, nessa altura do campeonato. So at this height of the championship, this is not a good idea, let's say. Or then he comes and, you know, invents something, or she different at this already at this crucial moment, or so much down the line. That's not good. Okay, so these are some things where football is of course very present. So it's the stereotype we know, but it's also of course always present. You know, and especially here, even though lately the people have been a little more disappointed, of course, as you can imagine. But still, it's the main sports. No, actually, we don't say it's this. No, we say the main sports in Brazil is actually volleyball. We say because football is more like a religion. They say. Okay, so you have your club, and you have, you know, you fight with people about, you know, what the best club is and what the best fan community is, and so on. So these are important points. And I want to ask you another poll here. So, which is, you know, what's your experience with Brazil? I'm launching it here, so please, if you could answer. It's online. Please vote what your experience is with Brazil, and we'll just see that. Oh, that's interesting scores here. We have about a third for each of these answers, okay? And most of you voted, so it's about, yeah, 40% don't have much experience. The other 2/3, let's say, know a little bit or have advanced knowledge. So especially those with advanced knowledge, afterwards, please give me comments and help me improve this webinar experience, and maybe we can share some more experiences, okay? All right, so thank you. So let's go on and have a look at get into the subject a little more detailed here. Hold on, let me just close the poll. Thank you for participating. Okay, so here you see. Oh, I think I skipped the last one here. Let me show you my screen now. So these are some faces of the fans of the World Cup, and I have some other pictures here. So one was very controversial, which was this one here, where FIFA had launched a little manual on what to do in Brazil and what not to do, and the ladies in the foreground, they already very stereotyped Brazilian, so that didn't come across very well to some people. And then here are friends, Dilma Rousseff, our president, and Joseph Blatter, who of course also had their fun with this whole experience, I suppose. Okay, and you can see that in their faces somehow. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the cross-cultural dimensions. So actually, what's the most interesting here for us? And I'm going to do this. Well, so we've identified three interesting things about dimensions. So of course, most of you will know what cross-cultural dimensions are. So there's the different authors who have worked with a subject, and they have identified different cultures where cultures are on extremes, on different scales, on different things. So one of them where I'm using here is the effective and neutral cultures. So people who are cultures people who are more effective, or people who are more neutral, who don't display their emotions so much. We think that's an interesting point. Then we have the power distance. So in other words, how comfortable are people with differences in power in society. This also goes a little bit together with hierarchy. So what's the hierarchy in a certain society? And then the other thing, which is a little more well known, maybe cultures who are more individualistic and some who are more collectivist. Okay, so these three we thought were quite interesting. So we'll share a few things with that. And I've done that with these four teams, let's say. Okay, so we have it's a very small sample, so and it's probably not statistically relevant, but it's nevertheless interesting. So we've taken the top. I've taken the top four teams here, because the others, it doesn't really make sense to use anybody after quarterfinals, because who's fifth, who's sixth in the championship, seventh and eighth, and so on. So I'm concentrating here on the four. The top four, the teams that made it to the semifinals. Okay, Germany, Argentina, the Netherlands, and Brazil. All right, so we're going to always consider these four. So as I said, don't take it too literally. And we've filtered out some information. We used some things more, some things less. And what I'm telling you here is actually what we used. Okay, so one thing that came up and that stuck up from some of the data, and actually it's probably the most significantly relevant, but maybe not, is the neutral effective, and it reminded me of the yellow card. So are you more, do you tend to be more effective in playing, or are you more of a neutral person, okay, or in the whole championship? Of course, this is also true for people, and we've seen that in the experience, people crying or people being happy and expressing their emotions. So I've taken here, I've tried to make the correlation between the number of yellow cards each country received. Okay, so this is what you see on the bottom scale, 5 to 15. I think it's actually 6 to 14 yellow cards were received by these teams. Okay, that was the difference. And then on the other side, I'm just saying, okay, who was first, who was second, who was third, and who was fourth. And there's a great correlation here between the result at the World Cup and the yellow cards these four teams got. Okay, it won't always be that easy, and it probably doesn't mean 100%. It doesn't explain 100% either. But you see here that Germany, for example, had only 6 yellow cards, whereas Argentina had 8, the Netherlands had 11, and Brazil had 14 yellow cards. Okay, so when we go back to we don't have really the scale for who's more emotional, who's less emotional as people, but probably some of this makes sense, as in general you would say that Brazilians are much more emotional than Germans. Okay, I can probably affirm that without any risk. So that's one thing. The other, the next, that's one thing. The other thing is power distance, and I want to launch a little question here maybe for you, so you can participate a little bit. Let me see. Okay, between higher, okay, I'm asking you a question here, which has to do with power distance. Can you see it? Okay, you're already voting, yeah. Okay, between higher and lower hierarchy, what wins World Cups? Yeah, and you are saying that three quarters of you say that the lower hierarchy wins World Cups more effectively than higher hierarchy. That's interesting. We're together. We can't really see that on this last. So thank you for voting. Okay, yeah, that's really 1/3, one quarter, like now 30% saying higher hierarchy is good. Well, it's not about good and bad again, so let's not take this too literally. But we're going to getting to a conclusion here, which is interesting, that you what your answers are here. So let me just go on. Thank you. Okay, so here power distance, this is not so, let's say, it's a little less significant from my point of view. We have here the power distance scores according to Hofstede, whereas, so, one of the authors, actually, for those of you who, who maybe do not know these things so much, I actually have their works here. So this is, Cultures and Organizations, Software of the Mind by Hofstede. Of course, the experts know this. And then, of course, I'm also using, and we always use, Writing the Waves of Culture by Trompenaars and Hampton Turner. And also other, of course, literature and books are helpful, like Richard Lewis, which, of course, most of you also know. If anybody wants bibliography recommendations, please let me know afterwards. Those I haven't prepared in advance, okay? So talking about power distance, which was more defined by Hofstede, so which has to do with hierarchy. We have higher hierarchies on the right, okay, and we have lower power distance scores on the left. So in general, let's say Germany and the Netherlands here have less power distance, have flatter societies, let's put it this way, whereas especially Brazil in this example is a more hierarchical culture, all right? And again, looking at the results of the World Cup, as I said, so you have Germany up there as the winner, second Argentina, and then you go on to the Netherlands and to Brazil. You could maybe draw a line, but as I said, it's probably not statistically relevant. What we thought was a little more, what we thought was a little more relevant is coming up in just a second. But let me, I haven't, sorry, now I'm sharing my screen. Again, okay, so here you are. Okay, and let's go on to well, how do we explain this also? If I go on to the next slide here, you can have a little laugh, I hope. This is, a joke, of course, in Brazil on how hierarchy works in in construction works, for example. So you have those gerentes looking at Zé, which is like which is Joseph, okay, so that comes from José. and he's working, and the other guys who are all managers or supervisors, they are helping him. Okay, so this is a little joke we have sometimes where people say, okay, only a few work, the others control. All right. Okay, let me pause a second here before we move on. Okay, so the next dimension here, which we talked a little bit more about, was individualism and collectivism. Okay, so this is, I think, an interesting point. So you find here, if you look on the Hofstede scale, and also if you look at Trompenaars, some cultures like the German and the Dutch culture tend to be more individualist on the right, and you have on the left those cultures who tend to be more collectivist. Of course, you know that, most of you. So, and then I put that against, okay, who scored? I was thinking, you know, what could we look at? Who scored goals for each team during the World Cup? Okay, and it turned out that, so I'm on the left, you will see now, you know, the percentage of goals scored by one player, by the top player of each team, which I probably, if you follow football, soccer a little bit, you will know who that is. Okay, maybe not so much. No, you probably won't know that. That's also an interesting point. Didn't even think about that before. You probably won't know the scorers in Germany and the Netherlands, or not so much. But you probably know who that is for Argentina and for Brazil. So in Argentina, there was one guy who scored half of the goals. Okay. And in Brazil, there was one guy who scored, I think it's 37% of the goals. Okay, so more than a third. Whereas here, it's, you know, it's only a little lower. We can also look at this from another perspective and say, okay, how many different people scored goals at each team? And then you have, so you have Germany where 8 different players scored, and you have Argentina with 4, Brazil with 6, and the Netherlands with 9 different players who scored goals during the World Cup 2014. So here, the one conclusion you could draw is that individualistic or more individualistic societies are able to distribute the goals more evenly among their players. Okay, whereas more collectivist societies like Brazil and Argentina in this example, they tend to concentrate their scoring more in less players, let's put it this way. Okay, again, as I said, this is only an interesting aspect, but maybe it can help us with some conclusions. Okay, let me see. Am I scaring my? Yeah, you're seeing. So here we're concentrated on a few other aspects which we thought could be interesting, but it was I couldn't manage to make them measurable. So of course, if you have a look at time and at long-term, short-term orientation, at planning, you can deduct big differences. You know, I already saw some of your comments also that some people said the planning, the construction of sites. You know, where do I want to stay? What, you know, which location should I be at to be able to move within the country quickly within this big country? So planning and dealing with time is of course a big thing, and it's all linked to the other dimension we saw before because they are all linked to each other, and sometimes they seem paradox, but that's part of our work, isn't it? Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is, I think is interesting, self-esteem and humility. So, you know, to be, or modesty, if you like. So, of course, you have like 10 of the 32 teams who arrive here and want to be champion, okay, or who believe they will be champion to a bigger or lesser extent, okay. And then you have modesty or humility, which plays out with some cultures more than with others, you know, and something that shocks people a little bit in Brazil sometimes is that maybe, for example, Brazilians and the Brazilian team also, they couldn't imagine that they wouldn't be winning the World Cup, you know. So anyway, so that's I think another interesting point. And then another one here from, which is I think more based on Trompenaars, locus of control, where you say, you know, where is am I responsible for my life, or is there a higher calling, a higher destiny, which rules my world? Okay, so and here I bring in this is actually a picture I think from the World Cup in South Africa. So I think you've seen this before, and I guess you get even fined for that in the US and in some other countries maybe, if you display your religion openly, you know. And that's of course something very Brazilian, where people, and you see the shirts, I love Jesus, where I think this locus of control is sometimes a little more external. So, you know, God or a higher being is of course more present maybe than in other cultures, and that gets manifest in public display on the field, and this is I think, you know, a little can be a little dangerous, of course. Yeah, and of course you go back and you say, okay, how much did we really control what we were doing with our team, and how much did we really bet that everything would turn out right and that we would be playing the best and be champions. Okay. So some points, you know, we have only 10-20 minutes left, so I'm going to move on a little quickly. Please, if you have any questions or if you want to raise your hands, I probably haven't seen that over the last few minutes. Let me put that on. So if you want to raise your hand, Sandra is raising her hand, and Adrienne also. Do you want to ask a question? Is that it? If you leave it up, I'll just give you the microphone and then you can talk to us. Is that right? Okay, so let's pause here for just a minute and then we move on. Sandra, do you want to say something? Hello. Okay, Sandra, you have talking right, please.
Oh, okay, I see. Well, I guess that's just a misunderstanding right now because I'm not raising my hand and it doesn't show,
Okay.
my display doesn't show a raised hand. So
all right.
I didn't want to say anything. Thanks.
Okay, but you said anything. Thank you for being there. I'll just put you back. Thanks.
Thank you.
Speak later. Okay. So Adrienne has taken down her hand. So, but then Patricia has put it up. So I'll just put Sandra on hold again. And Patricia, I guess you want to say something. So, and if you just want to say hello from Florida, that's fine also. Hi, Patricia.
Afternoon, evening for others. I just wanted to comment on the picture about prayer, and hopefully we can do some work around the world so that we can see prayer of another group as something that they need personally, but not as a recruitment technique that others should take part of it, just an observance. So I know there's a lot of work to be done, but unfortunately that's still a very raw subject around the world. So lots of work to do.
Okay, well, thank you very much. To comment on this really, let's say, personal subject, as you say, a little critical. So thank you for not being afraid to speak about it. And yeah, really, maybe we can actually have a discussion group more on that, Patricia. Thanks. All right, so this works. You see, please, if there's something you would like to add, just let me know. Okay, so some conclusions here, which again, you know, I have to be careful, so don't get it wrong. So I'm just saying here, emotions can have a strong impact on the results we get, you know, in the good sense and in the bad sense. And of course, again, you know, there must be situations where showing your emotions is fine and helps, and others where it doesn't, I suppose. Okay, but that's one thing we can maybe conclude from the data I shared. Another thing is interesting here. High individualism seems to be compatible with good teamwork. You know, actually in Brazil, sometimes we say, yeah, the teamwork, when we import trainings or programs from the US, we import teamwork programs from the US and have them here in Brazil because they need them, the Americans. I've heard that before, but we don't because we are naturally team workers. So you know, that's also a point where I think we can you know, answer a little differently in the future, because being, and that's the next point here, being collectivist and friendly doesn't mean that you are a good team worker. So one thing doesn't automatically mean the other. I suppose you're seeing my screen, yes? Okay, so the next thing here I was saying, in more hierarchical and collectivist cultures, hierarchy seems to be the dominant force. That seems to be interesting, that between those two, hierarchy takes over. Okay, that's something we concluded from this reflection that we were doing over the last weeks on this subject. That's one thing, and that, on the other hand, seems to make people less participative and committed. So if you have a strong hierarchy where somebody takes control, there may be a danger that some people withdraw and they don't feel anymore so participative and committed. Okay, open to discussion also, as I said. So that brings me to the main conclusion, which is not really, you know, probably the revolution of the century, but teamwork brings the best results. And some of you said that in the chat in the beginning. What you know, one of the things that stuck out maybe for the German team was really teamwork, and you maybe didn't see that so much in other teams. Okay, and of course, if we take that to the business world now, and a lot of people talk about that, highly efficient teams and highly effective teams and so on. This, I think, even though this seems obvious, we can maybe still do some work there to convince people that this makes sense. And that reminded me of something I'm going to share in just a second, which is oh, sorry, I wrote in Portuguese here, I didn't even notice, you know how that is. So it's a maturity continuum from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I guess some of you must have heard about, Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits. So that reminded me of this one here. I also am a facilitator for Franklin Covey, so this is why I take the freedom here to bring this in. And the interesting thing is that he says on his 7 Habits on this maturity continuum that we all start out as dependent people. So we depend on someone. And there's also some people who never get past this scale. So if you take a child, it depends on its parents. If you take some people you work with, they depend on other people to know what to do. Okay? So what Franklin Covey says, the first 3 habits, they help you to get to the private victory, as he calls this, and to move up this circle, this continuum, and get into something better than dependence, which is what people experience when they move into, how do you say, into adolescence, when they become youngsters. Like my son, who's 13, he's getting there. People go on to independence. So they don't depend so much anymore on others because they mastered some things in their life, which is what Stephen Covey calls the first 3 habits. Okay, so if you want to look that up afterwards, I highly recommend this. It's probably well known, but if you haven't looked at it in a while, it's worth it. Okay, but that's also has its limits, and that's where, you know, the teamwork thought comes in, because it's good to be independent, but it's not enough. So he says that what we really need is interdependence, where people depend upon each other, because none of us can do everything by ourselves, and we should be conscious that we have to also sometimes depend on others, and that will be something better. And of course, we as interculturalists, we know, you know, this thought that the cross-cultural team sometimes is, or the heterogeneous team is sometimes more complicated in the beginning, but in the long run, it brings better results, and that's true for societies, of course, also. So this interdependence thought and the synergy, you know, of differences is, of course, of diversity, makes a lot of sense. So I just, I think it matches very well with what we said before. And that reminded me of, I thought, maybe to finish off this with a quote of John Wooden, famous older NBA coach in the 70s, one of the most successful NBA coaches. No, actually, he wasn't in the NBA. He was in college baseball. Okay, so he says this, a player who makes a team great is more valuable than a great player. And he worked with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and put him on the bench sometimes. And he always says, use the bench. And you don't see in the World Cup, you don't see people using the bench so much. Okay, the great player is always playing. And that's, of course, a thing. So you're losing yourself in the group for the good of the group, that's real teamwork, he says. Okay. If you haven't heard about John Wooden, it's an older concept. And of course, he just passed away, I think, 3 years ago or something, or 4. But still some very interesting thoughts from his side. Okay. So these were my thoughts. And I open it up to questions, and we'll try to answer them, or maybe it's not questions, answers. It's maybe more of a discussion. So please just raise your hand if you want to say something, and then we wrap it up. Okay. Patricia is raising her hand. Over to you, Patricia.
No, actually, this time I was not. I think I forgot to to take it off. But great presentation. It just brought back. I knew a lot of what you said, but I did not know the terminology. And actually, I can turn this into a more direct question. So the terminology that you mentioned earlier was really great. But I was wondering, is it used in just common conversations, or is it used a lot more in business?
You were talking about the terminology, about the sayings I mentioned at the beginning.
Yes, saying earlier, using soccer, soccer terminology.
Well, let's see. The first one. Let me just go back there, so we are talking about the same thing. So if you look at the words, they are more used in these words. You're seeing them. They are more used in, this is soccer vocabulary, okay? So this is more used. Sometimes you would say something like, I have to dribble the circumstances or something. But this is more, well, they can have a second meaning, let's say. So if I get a fee, I get a fine, somebody could call that a penalty, for example, okay? Mm-hmm. But generally, we're talking more, these others in general, they are more used on a day-to-day basis. So they really...
Okay, so that was my question. My question. So those on that slide that you're showing now,
yes,
are they, because we do in the U.S., we talk a lot about, we use sports a lot of baseball and American football terminology are used a lot in business, and that's a big obstacle for speakers of English as a second language.
Yes, of course. Yeah, well, as you know, the expressions are different, the sports are different, and we probably use a lot more soccer than anything else here, whereas you use baseball and basketball and American football. And actually, Chris Mann, who's also on the line, she is American. She was talking about that to the Brazilians, who tend to have a lot of problems with that the other day. So she, we have to have the whole vocabulary on that, and Brazilians tend to not understand what the US Americans try to say with those kind of metaphors. So that's a good point. Yeah, we use them here, but the sports is different, and but they are used in the same in the business world.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? I guess Sandra is with her hand up, but that's probably, I'm not sure if you can turn it off or if you want to say something really. Well, we have 9 minutes left. I'm not sure. So still there's a chance for us to chat. Let me just go back and leave my comments. And also, yes, I have of course a final question here. One of them, let me just go back here. Let me go back to the end. Okay, so here, of course, you will probably already have my contents, but my contact data, but I will leave them up here. And then also I'm going to raise a different question now from for you to answer. Maybe you have some comments. Yeah, I would like your comments on this webinar. Please, just anything else. So I'm saying here, please give us your comments for improvements. Okay, if you could do that, while we finish this, and hold on for a few more minutes, and I'm going to have a look if other questions came in. Yeah, maybe we're already. Yeah, okay, there's some questions here. So there's a question: have you looked at the data of the past World Cups? Let me just go back here. Okay, Chris is talking about the American Zeh, who wasn't as good. Did I look at the statistics from last other World Cups? Yes, I did. Let me just pick them up here. So it varies. I found it quite interesting. Normally the distribution of goals or different scorers per team was the same. But you see that cards and goals in general scored by team, they vary quite a lot. For example, so I've looked at some of them, but then the teams are also different. Do I take the top 4 from the last World Cup, or do I just take the Netherlands? I was looking at the Netherlands, who got eliminated in 2006, I think, in the first round. So I couldn't compare them. But I'm not sure what is behind your question. Very good question, but it's not consistent probably over time. I think the average goals per person, or the average of scorers per team are quite significant. So maybe that one we can use. I'm not so sure about individualism, and well, that has to do with individualism. I'm not so sure about power distance and the emotions, talking about yellow cards, for example. Okay, there are some comments coming in here. I would place the amount of players that scored in power distance. In fact, the sheet near the end that power distance rules. Collectivism from Yvonne. Okay, thank you. Okay, there's actually somebody who worked for the DFB, so that's great. We need to speak more. That's you, Ellen, right? Okay, good to know. So as you know, that's a danger in webinars. You talk to specialists and you sometimes don't know about it. So I'm leaving you maybe with this last poll. Please evaluate the webinar. Let me know how satisfied were you with this experience. It's online, so please make your choice. And I thank you very much for your interest. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the next webinar of CETA Europe. I think that's something we also be starting to do in Brazil. Of course, it's a technology we have to use. So congratulations to CETA Europe for that. So I'm glad that nobody was dissatisfied with the webinar. We have about 30% very satisfied and 70% more or less satisfied. So that's great. Thank you very much. Please let me have your comments if you like, or if it can be of any help. Let me know in the future if you need anything from Brazil. Okay, or if you're here, look me up and make sure you see what is happening at CETA in Brazil, so we can do something or invite you maybe for a workshop or something. Okay, so let us know. And thank you very much. I suppose we'll finish a few minutes early. Don't forget to download the 2 files that I put there as handouts. And take care. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.